Why is that guy hanging upside down? Because that's not going to result in. Hi guys, my name is Joe, and welcome to Fighting Words, the Martial Arts Library. This is a segment I refer to as Media Fight Mondays. So, on the first and third Monday of every month, we take a fight scene from movies, television, animation, etc. I break down the action for you guys, and then I give it a grade based on realism and storytelling value. So this week what I'm covering is a fight scene from the 1998 movie Soldier, starring Kurt Russell. This is going to be a fight scene between Kurt Russell and some of his fellow soldiers and Jason Scott Lee, who is playing a new breed of soldier. This movie is set in what at the time was the near future. Yeah, like 2036, which is not that far away. Man, they thought that we'd have colonies on other planets by then. As the story goes, the government has taken some orphans and turned them into like battle-hardened soldiers. You know, similar to the classical Spartans. You know, we see a training montage where they're being trained as children, and you know, like one of the kids falls out of line when they're running, and you get shot because you're not good enough to be a soldier. We only take the best. You know, flash forward, I think they said like 40 years or so. We have the battle-hardened soldiers who are being replaced by the genetically engineered soldiers. Jason Scott Lee's character of Caine is one of those, and he is being placed in a 3-on-1 scenario. Now, as far as backgrounds and the actors go, I couldn't find if Kurt Russell had any like consistent martial arts training. You know, by this point in his career, he'd been in a number of action movies. I can only assume that he probably picked up stage fighting, and that's how we got where we are. Jason Scott Lee, prior to making this movie, a few years before, he actually starred in the Bruce Lee biopic Dragon the Bruce Lee Story. And in preparing for that, he trained with one of Bruce Lee's students by the name of Jerry Poteet. Ultimately, this would result in Mr. Lee, Mr. Jason Scott Lee, being certified as an instructor in Jeet Kune Do under Mr. Poteet. So that was his martial arts background. Dick Ziker, Z-I-K-E-R, he'd done stunts for many different movies going back to including Westworld from 1973 and To Live and Die in LA and several other films. I don't know who had a hand in constructing this fight scene the most. If Mr. Urquidez was not credited, I'm willing to bet his input on this was probably minimal, but I do feel like including him because he's a legend and he's trained Hollywood stars and all that. Anyway, 3-on-1. They are all hanging from a series of chains. This doesn't make any sense to me, but this is how they decided that they were going to test out their fighting skills. So as the scene begins, 3 of the old soldiers, in addition to the single new soldier, Caine, Jason Scott Lee, they're all hanging from chains. So, Kurt Russell's character's Todd rushes in, gets hit twice in the face, another soldier gets kicked. This one's throwing punches and not doing well. Okay. He threw a jab that was slipped, he threw a hook. Caine avoided that, looked like he landed a kidney shot. Then when the guy threw another punch, he actually looked like he hyperextended his elbow over his own arm. And then hit him again. I think that's a neat moment. It's not going to have any effect on the outcome of the fight. Which you really think it should if you're like hanging off of these chains, right? Ugh. So Todd shows up again, shows zero situational awareness because his back is to the bad guy. That seems like a very rookie mistake. that doesn't even seem like a mistake a rookie would make, you know? Why would you not be looking for your enemy? I'm wondering if there was something that might have gotten cut out of this scene, like, you know, Jason Scott Lee's character maybe maneuvered suddenly without Kurt Russell's character noticing. It's not what we wound up seeing on screen, so it just makes Todd look stupid. So here he goes climbing up again. All right. Oof. So that's not a bad idea. We see one of the older soldiers seeing what the newer soldier has done, and he gives it a shot on his own. Caine avoids it and then throws a single kick, which knocks this guy off the chains and his death. Okay, I wanted you guys to see the landing. Here's a couple of things to notice in the landing. First of all, there was like, I assume it was put in post-production, like a jet of red escaping from around his face, which I think is meant to imply that he's got like major internal organ damage, despite the fact that the fall wasn't really all that far. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's going to mess you up. You know, falls like that have messed people up. I don't think it's going to cause your internal organs to explode. Another thing to note, because I am going to call back to it at the end of the fight, we noticed that when this guy landed, his chin was tucked, his head did not smack against the ground. We're going to come back to that. So we see Todd being kicked down again. So this guy jumps on Caine's back, just like hammer fisting him in the side, and Todd responds by a smack to the groin, back fist to the face, and then like kicks him twice. He kicks him twice, he falls down, and now he's convulsing. And I guess we're supposed to assume that that has resulted in a fatality. We don't see what causes that. You know, why is that guy hanging upside down? Did he get his foot caught on one of the chains? Because that's not going to result in like, you know, having a seizure or death throes or whatever that was supposed to be, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And again, we don't really see what he's caught on. You know, if it's only chains, like, he's probably going to need rehab for like his knee and his ankle. But that's not going to result in a fatality. So I don't understand why they were selling that the way that they were. So Todd has snuck up. All right, jumps on his back. Now, I think in general, this is a good idea. It may result in what's referred to as a Pyrrhic victory. So if this guy's busy holding on to a bunch of chains, it's going to be very difficult for him to fight off any holds. However, this maneuver is designed to render him unconscious. If he falls unconscious, he's going to let go of the chains. And if you're not quick enough to grab a chain, you're both going to fall off. And you may wind up landing first. I don't know if it's that great an idea. As far as, you know, being forward thinking. Now we are seeing him being sneaky, you know. Maybe he does have a backup plan. You know, maybe he is like, okay, when he passes out, I'm going to go ahead and grab the chains. I got this. There's risk there, and I don't know if it's being addressed by anything that we've seen so far. Okay. Now, he went back and forth between putting his hand on top of his head and grabbing his own arm. If the guy is not actively fighting you off, and he sort of is, he's grabbing a little bit. The optimum way that choke is performed is the arm that goes around the neck, the one that's actively choking, you clamp that with your own arm. Typically it's taught going to the biceps. You can go up a little bit higher if it's available. But this way you can tuck your arm in your own elbow and then you take the arm that you're using to clamp down on your own arm, and you go behind the guy's head. You don't go on top of his head. That's sort of a pro wrestling thing. The reason it's used in pro wrestling is because it's not real. But you go behind the guy's neck. The reason you do that is so the guy can't pull your supporting hand away and expose this hand. And I don't know why he went over to clamp. This is not the optimal way to secure this. This is like doing some sort of reverse curl instead of palm to palm. You can really tighten that up. So I'm being very critical of this fictitious soldier's ability to apply a choke. So we get a bite, and he responds to the bite by raking his eyes and severely damaging one of his eyes. Now, I will say, when you hear people talking about, well, if I was in a street fight, I'd just bite the guy, I'd just stick my finger in his eye. I'm not saying that those things are off the table. I'm saying if you are in the middle of something that doesn't involve one of those things, and then you introduce an element where you might maim someone, that sort of gives the other person permission to do that too. Like, no, we were just having a nice little fist fight until you decided that you were going to disfigure me, and now I get to do the same to you. And I think we're seeing that illustrated, whether that was intentional or not by the choreographer. In a good chokehold, you're not going to be able to bite the guy. You're going to be under the chin. How do you, unless you're capable of biting your own neck, you really shouldn't be able to bite the arm that's going around the neck if it's done properly. And that's step one is the easy, shove the guy's neck into the crook of your elbow. Okay, we're under the chin. And there are many different methods for getting underneath the chin. I don't think that Todd's forearm should have been exposed to being bitten at that time. For the purposes of this fight, we knew Todd wasn't going, or they had decided that Todd wasn't going to win, so we need to find a way to let Caine win. But you can definitely damage the eye with your fingers. There's an awful lot, like those are straight up lacerations. I'm not sure that is a realistic result. Yeah, you can definitely damage the eye. People have had their eyes damaged. I think one of the more famous cases was Yuki Nakai in Vale Tudo, Japan in '94. He had 3 fights that night. In his first fight, the guy gouged him to the point where he did result in permanent damage. But he had 2 more fights. And his eyes were definitely swollen. They'd definitely taken some damage, but we didn't see that sort of like visceral. I can understand why they would want to do that as far as like special effects team and all that. So, Kurt Russell eats an elbow to the body, and now he's like punching his hip, which is dumb. And then he takes 3 really rapid fire elbows to the face. That'll do that. I'm surprised he didn't show like a broken nose or abrasions or anything like that. Okay, so he has fallen down, landed on top of the first guy who fell. Here's what I want you to notice. There's like a pool of blood underneath this first guy. How did that happen? You remember when I said, look, his head didn't even hit the ground, so where's the blood coming from? Let's begin by looking at realism. Ignoring the fact that it seems very unrealistic to me to have a fight when you're hanging around a bunch of chains. There are much better surfaces on which to have hand-to-hand combat. I think it does add a cool factor, but as far as realism goes, I don't know why they would risk doing that. You can have a fight on wrestling mats or in a boxing ring or something like that. You would definitely save yourself from having severe injuries, although, as I mentioned, sort of in the prologue to this movie, we saw that there was like 0 tolerance for weakness at all. So I guess if you get injured, you just get taken out back and shot, maybe. For such an unusual environment, I like that most of the techniques they used did seem appropriate. You know, they're hanging on the chains, and I don't know if you saw that there were discs on the chains, so that presumably one could stand on them. You know, so they're striking with one hand while holding onto the chain with the other. Uh, the the maneuver that best took advantage of that environment that I saw is hanging onto two chains and swinging forward and kicking the guy with both of your feet. We saw that being used to pretty good effect in the beginning. I don't think that the reactions from the attacks were all that realistic. I think that the damage in some cases was exaggerated. For instance, I don't understand how a hardened soldier with the mission of take out the bad guy is stunned by, like, oh, he smacked me in my groin. I get it, guys, it hurts, but it only hurts. You have the choice to acknowledge it or not. If you got kicked between the legs and you were in a burning house, do you think that you'd just be unable to get up and get out of that house? You know, you can choose to ignore the pain and continue with whatever mission you have. So, I mean, I've had it done to me in sparring. Like, bang, oh, that sucks, but also I need to address these punches that are coming into my face. Okay, you know, nobody's called timeout. We still got to go. I guess ultimately I'm probably going to give it like a middle of the road C as far as realism goes. You know, I think the offensive techniques were probably a good choice for that environment for the most part. I just think that the damage that the folks took was overrated. As far as storytelling value goes, we got a little bit of it. I think we got to see how Todd, our protagonist, you know, he gets knocked down in the very first exchange, but is able to grab one of the chains and come back. He gets kicked again and still able to grab the chains and come back. So we get a story of his tenacity. And he's really the only one that puts the other guy, Caine, in any sort of jeopardy and winds up actually damaging him. And I think that helps to set up, you know, like something personal between them. I don't remember how much it actually got played up in the movie. It's been ages since I've actually watched it. But, you know, now you can sort of have the story, if you choose to, like, oh, this guy's my nemesis because he blinded me. I think the way it was filmed, it was sort of confusing the relationship between the combatants at times. I think that, you know, detracted from the storytelling aspect. For the little bit of character development we got, I'm going to go ahead and give it a C+. I don't think it was, you know, a C being the basic level. I don't think it was negative. I don't think there was anything to write home about when it came to, you know, the story that was being told here. Anyway, thank you for watching. That's all I have for this week. If you would like to help support the channel, or you would like to recommend a video for me to do, please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. I'm going to put a link to that in the description. Yeah, thanks for watching along with me, and see you guys later.